Morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's titled The Shift in SME Expectations of Their Accountant, What the Research is Saying and the Impact of COVID-19. So look, I know it's just after 9 a.m. there, so we'll just give it another minute or two, make sure that we get everyone who wants to can join us. While we're waiting, I thought it was interesting just to dive into a couple of the questions that we asked. So we asked these questions when we sent out the registrations, and thanks so much to everyone who answered. Some really interesting insights. So the first one, what aspects do you find most challenging? I thought especially the best way to get engagement and how often that should be was a really critical one. Luckily digital gives you some options and we'll talk about those later. But there was an interesting one, which was how to move from educating clients and prospects to accepting a proposal. I think, Mike, you've got some thoughts on that later for us.
Well, I think, well, it's probably more Phil's expertise.
Oh, sorry, Phil, yeah.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yes. I mean, in fairness, yeah, but I think Mike would have a lot to say on it as well. But yeah, we'll certainly try and cover that later. Yeah.
And I thought also there's a couple of things in there, sales and marketing, and that's obviously a little bit what we will get into today. It can be a bit of a scary topic, and then time and all of it. I think a lot of people look at this and think, my goodness, it's complex and it's a bit scary and I'm already busy, how do I do it? So the second one we sent out was looking at very much, what are you unsure of, what are you challenged by? And I think, one element that came up really clearly there was, the lack of networking and face-to-face relationship building, which we know is, has been in the past a really key part of how you engage with clients and prospects. And so to suddenly have that taken away, or at least very much changed, is a real challenge for you. And another interesting one that came across was getting a unified approach across the whole team. So it is important. You can't have just one person, maybe in a practice or a firm, thinking that we should be doing these things. It really has to be buy-in from everyone, and everyone sort of rowing in the same direction. Cool, so I think we've given enough time for everyone to join. Thanks so much, everyone. My name is Charles Clark. I'm Marketing Director of Boma. I'm really, really thrilled today to be joined by two special guests. We've got Mike Crook, who's Managing Director of PracticeWeb. Now, Mike has long experience in digital marketing and strategy, and he's been part of PracticeWeb for some time, and they've been working with accounting firms for over 20 years in the UK. So welcome, Mike.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Nice to be here, and I'm looking forward to imparting the research that we've got to share today. So thanks.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. And then we're joined by Phil Sayers, who's founder of Proten Sales Development. So Phil has been a salesman, sales director. He's a CEO and an author, and he works with accountants to try and help them basically improve how they sell their products. So I think on the back of what we're going to learn from Mike today, Phil will have some really critical insights to impart to you. So welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, good to be back again. And yeah, I think Mike's research is incredibly valuable, and the insights that you'll see as we go through this session give us some really strong ideas as to how to perhaps change the way we're interacting with clients and potential clients.
So just to give you a quick rundown of today's agenda, I hope you will have received the workbook for today. It came out a little bit later than planned, so if you're still getting into that, that's okay. You can obviously download it or print it out. We're going to be covering obviously PracticeWeb's research insights, and in particular what are SMEs valuing and what makes clients switch. And I think that's a really critical part. Alongside that is the most important characteristics valued by SMEs for an accounting. And then really what Phil and I will be addressing is how you can take advantage of this, how you can support them, and how you can engage with them and sell to them without being sort of seen as a hard sell. So as ever, if you've got questions, do pop them in the question box. We'll do our best to answer them as we go along, or if you prefer to wait till the end, we'll be doing questions at the end if anyone has them. So Mike, can't wait to see what you've uncovered.
Sure. Yeah, cheers, Charles. Yeah, so what I wanted to do was talk through a number of reports that we've put out over the year. So if you can cast your mind back to January, when we were all allowed to kind of meet in public, one-to-one, there was a report that we put out which was around what SMEs value in accounting firms. And as that rolled out in January, rolled sort of forward 3 months, and obviously the pandemic hit. And I was kind of concerned that that piece of research really was no longer valid. But actually, bit of a spoiler alert, I guess, it's still valid, and but I think the pandemic itself has kind of strengthened some of those findings. But equally, what we then did is during the pandemic, every 2 weeks, we ran a temperature check report with SMEs just to kind of assess the mood of what's going on. And how they were kind of coping and responding to the pandemic, but importantly, how their accountant was supporting them. So that's what I want to talk about today, is the January report we ran and what we found in there, and then also then our most recent findings and research and how those two things differ. So if you go on to the next slide, Charles, just wanted to talk about how we get our research before we go into the findings. And we do it in a number of ways. First and foremost, we run a forum, as well as being a digital marketing agency who works with accountants. We also run a small business forum, and that's called UK Business Forums. And within that, we have a number of different forum sections that cover things like tax and VAT. And they're always, these sort of micro businesses and SMEs are always talking about the challenges they have with their business. And a lot of them relate down to where perhaps accountants could support and help them. And we get about just over 1 million views every quarter, and it's really active because actually we get about just under 2,000 threads every quarter, so new conversations starting and happening. And what we do with that information is we actually mine that data and take it out, and then we put it into insight. We bolster that up by doing some surveys, so we may do a survey of a sector survey, or we may do a wider SME survey, and then we do sort of one-to-one interviews as well to get some good insight. So then we package all that up and we put it on our website. So you can go to practiceweb.co.uk/knowledge and /insight, and within there you'll see a number of reports. You'll see all our pandemic reports that we put out. You'll also see the January report that I'm talking about today as well, so feel free to go on and download those. So Charles, if you knock it on a slide. So I want to talk to you about the January report first and let you know, or rather talk about some of those findings so that then we can kind of compare to how those have sort of shifted in the minds of SMEs. So this first report in January was called, What Do SMEs Want from Their Accountant? And the overriding theme really was around creating emotional connection with clients and prospects. And by that, it was more to do with that the SMEs wanted to make sure that their chosen firm, if you like, during the sort of buying process, understood them, understood their needs, their challenges, understood their sector, and got them, and could prove that they've worked with people like that before. And if you think about business buyers, they kind of want the same thing now as they do when they're buying for themselves. And as SMEs, you're kind of a business owner. You're, you're probably making the sole decision as a business owner. Therefore, it becomes more of an emotional thing. And accountants kind of needed to make that connection on an emotional level rather than just selling them a service. So that was kind of the overriding theme. On the next slide, what you can see here is actually what they valued during the buying cycle. And when they were making a purchase decision, they only had these 4 things in their mind. And that was, is that firm professional? And I appreciate that's kind of a hygiene factor maybe, and a bit more nebulous thing. So I'm going to talk about what professionalism actually means in a minute. Quality of service was incredibly important. Again, I'll touch upon that a bit later as well. Professional body accreditation, I think that's great news, because actually when I talk to a lot of firms, they often say, do SMEs actually even know what a professional body accreditation means? Well, actually they're looking for that during a buying decision. And then sector knowledge, do they understand my sector, is another important factor. So on the next slide, what we've got is some of the statistics just to kind of back that up. So 52% of those respondents of this particular survey in January said that professionalism is the most important factor. And I'm going to talk about what professionalism means in a minute. The quality of service. The interesting thing is 60% said that they would actually switch if the quality of service didn't meet their expectation, and price was actually secondary. So I think that's quite an encouraging point as well. The professional body I talked about, so you know, kind of an overwhelming majority looked for that stamp of a professional body accreditation to help weed out who they should be shortlisting and talking to. And then they wanted pretty much all of them, just over 70%, said they looked for the fact that they understood their sector, got their challenges, they understood their needs as well. So on the next slide, what I've got is just about professionalism, because I think there's a certain level of expectation, I guess, that comes with that. And when I've spoken to accountants in the past, I remember having this conversation with somebody who focused in on the trade sector. And he said, well, I don't wear a suit and tie. We're fairly informal. You know, we have lots of banter. We swear at each other. I'm not professional, Mike. Well, actually, that's not kind of what we mean here. And if you're in the corporate world, you may be wearing suit and ties. So how you dress and how you act is one element of, I guess, professionalism, but that's contextual. You're going to dress how your target client dresses. You're going to act how they act. But when they think about professionalism, they're looking at these things. They're making sure that they're thinking that you have that specialist knowledge, that you're regularly training. So that professional body accreditation becomes even more important because they're expecting you to have that. That you're competent and that actually you're reliable in what you're doing, and actually you can make a situation right, or the best to make a situation right. You hold yourself to account and you stay calm under pressure. So those are things that they deemed important in January. And I think during that pandemic, I would say that, you know, doing your best to make a situation right, holding yourself to account and staying calm under pressure was certainly tested. And that's why they were looking for, or that's what they're looking for rather, when they're making those buying decisions. So on the next slide, you can see that we're looking at, you know, what would make a client switch. So in this instance, as you can see, poor quality of service was up there. So it's really important that the service that you get or you give is up to their expectations. The price was secondary. So when we spoke to SMEs, they said to us that actually, if I can get it for a few £100 cheaper or a few £1,000 cheaper down the road at a different accountant, I'm not that bothered. What I'm looking for is making sure that I have got a really strong bond, a good service from my accountant, and therefore I will stay. So if that service isn't up to scratch, then they are going to look to leave. And that's something that you need to make sure that, you know, your service and the way in which you service your clients is as they expect. So on to the next slide, Charles. So that's the January sort of summary of the January report. Roll on 6 months. So how has that changed? So the top, well, this particular research was, which again you can download from our site, is called The Importance of Communication and Human Connection. So we ran this research. This was the last report we ran, going back about a month ago now. And it stated that 49%, just under half of those respondents, said communication skills was the most important factor that an accountant should have right now. Yes, that's not surprising necessarily, but it's the most important factor. So if you think about the other things we just talked about in January, how important you know, professionalism and sector knowledge, all of that sort of stuff was, it's actually communication is the most important right now. So on to the next slide, which actually outlines the 5 most important characteristics that we found. So communication, crisis management, maybe that's not so surprising given the situation that we're in. But again, specialist knowledge came through. So they're making sure that you get them, you understand their needs and their challenges. Being able to be flexible and adapt to the situation, to their needs. Again, that kind of speaks towards the customer experience angle, and then demonstrating or showing leadership. So if you think that you know, being professional, as we talked about a minute ago, it's just kind of another way of saying it really, where you're being able to demonstrate the expertise. And if you are a you know, a sole business owner, perhaps an entrepreneur, maybe you haven't got a management team around you, they're kind of lonely, right? They need somebody to help them and show them and demonstrate leadership. And that's kind of what they're looking for from their accountant, really. On to the next slide. So the hard work paid off. I think the really good news out of the survey were that 69% of respondents said that their firm had actually exceeded their expectation. It went above and beyond during the pandemic and delivered an exceptional service, really. Then it was 37% said they were more likely to recommend, again, because of the way that their firm handled and dealt with the pandemic. They're actually more likely to recommend those firms. And I think that's important to kind of capitalize on, and we'll talk about how to take action from this data later, but actually being able to capitalize on some of this stuff in your marketing is really important. 24% said they were no longer looking to switch. And again, I suppose that the theme of these three things is it's the customer experience, it's that emotional connection, it's being there, it's supporting them, showing leadership, all of that's good stuff. And 24% are no longer looking to switch. And when we spoke to SMEs, they said that actually, or the ones that were looking to switch said, yeah, I just wasn't happy with my account. They weren't giving me the service I was looking for. I'm looking to switch. But actually, because of the way they've communicated, because of the way they've managed this experience that I've had, I'm actually now not looking to switch. So as long as those firms now kind of, take whatever they did differently, bake it into their process and make sure that it's ongoing, they're going to retain and keep those clients. But not everybody got it right. So there are some negatives here. So of those that filled in this survey said that 16% said that actually their accountant didn't meet those expectations. They failed to meet them. 11% said actually they underperformed. They didn't go above and beyond where there was this kind of expectation that they would, and that just didn't happen. And then, yeah, sadly, 11% of those surveys said, yeah, we're going to switch because of the way or lack of response and customer service that I was given during the pandemic. So final slide from me really is what can you do to kind of take this insight and sort of draw action from it really. And the three things I put in here, which is assess, reflect and take action. I think if you can assess your customer experience, you reflect on what worked, what didn't, speak to your customers, speak to your clients, see what you did differently, what should you keep? Because I think a lot of people did things differently over the last 4 to 5 months than they have done before. So what is that you think you can keep? I mean, we can't all stay in crisis mode forever, I get that. But actually there's probably some things that you've done that your clients have valued. So how do you make sure you bake that into your practices and keep it going forward? Your firm proposition, again, assess what I've talked about today and reflect whether or not that's in your proposition, because I think it's really important that you actually speak to the needs and understand the value of what you're doing, but actually have that reflected into your firm's proposition. So those things that I've talked about today, are you reflecting them in what you're doing? And that's the same for your digital marketing, really. Are you demonstrating your expertise? What's great is if you're one of those firms that actually have all those positive feedback, how do you capitalize on that? Have you got great case studies from the last 4 or 5 months to show how you've helped businesses? Have you driven up your reviews so that you can demonstrate to prospects as they come through that you get them, you've got a great customer experience, you've helped people like them before? It's a really good time to capitalize on all that good work that you've done over the last 4 or 5 months to then reflect in your marketing, your proposition. And importantly, as we've just talked about, how are you communicating? What's your communication strategy? What's your content marketing strategy like? I know that there was a number of questions that Charles showed earlier on, which was how often should we communicate? How do we communicate on social media? All of that good stuff. You need to think about strategy. Don't just dive straight into it, but think about it, do it in a measured way. But SMEs, micro businesses, they want strong communication from accountants right now. So now is the time to kind of build that up. And the really nice thing about what I saw during the pandemic is a lot of accountants stepping up to do great videos, explainers, just rough and ready. It didn't need to be, high production quality. That wasn't the point. It was more about the information. Keep those up. Do some great blogging, maybe downloadable assets on certain topics, allowable expenses, to X, Y, and Z. Just keep doing the marketing, but do it in a measured way. Do it with strategy in mind, with an end goal as well. So that's yeah. That's me.
It's fantastic. And it's really interesting to see that communication has become such a core part of it. And I think given, you know, obviously compliance will always be a core part of an offering, but, you know, business advisory and communications sort of seem to go hand in hand, you know, understanding the needs of a client and then communicating, you know, what can be done and advising, and that sort of human connection just, and as you were saying, you know, one of the things that may not sort of go back to as it was is that, you know, I think communication will going forth probably hopefully will remain right up there as kind of one of the key bits that an accountant will be expected to have with their clients.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that two things when we did the survey and we ran the interviews, a number of SMEs said, these accountants have just opened up their business to us. It's fantastic. And I appreciate that they might not be able to do all of that ongoing, but how do we keep a little bit of that? And equally, I think when we talk to accountants, they often say to us, well, actually, if I do all this stuff, aren't I just giving away the crown jewels? You know, if I'm giving away my expertise on a video or something, it's not. It's actually just enforcing the fact or reinforcing the fact that you are the go-to expert and you know your stuff. Those people who are going to do it on their own, they're always going to do it on their own. But actually, you are demonstrating how an expert you are in your field and that you are right for them. So I think those sorts of, you know, communication, if you like, isn't giving away the crown jewels. It's just showing how valuable you are.
Yeah. Well, look, and hopefully we can pick up on some of those themes in the next couple of slides. So, look, as Mike was saying, you know, from January through to sort of March, April, the world turned on its head and it looks very different now. And if you think about businesses, you know, the current situation is pretty much without precedent and living memory. And now more than ever, they need your advice and needs the support. So, you know, the key is don't stop marketing. It's actually more important than ever before. And if it helps to think of it like this, think of it as sharing helpful messages. As Mike just pointed out, you can use this to demonstrate your expertise. You may be doing it in a general way and people will always need it sort of specific to their situation, to their business. So don't, as he sort of said, you know, don't be concerned that you're sort of giving away all the secrets. People will always need you to implement it for their business sort of in that personal way. So a couple of things that this means is if you haven't already, get digital. So traditional field marketing events, conferences, even education for all sorts of industries have all been digitized overnight. And to be fair and unlikely to return to the way it was for some time. So you really need to think differently about how you're going to connect and engage with your clients and prospects. So what does this mean in practice? So first off is your website. It's your shop window, and it's still the place where most of your clients and prospects will go to do research and find out about you, your services, who your other clients are and what you can offer them. But equally, if you don't keep them updated, they can lose their relevance. And I think this is never more accurately demonstrated than with COVID. So when COVID happened, did you change or review your messaging? You definitely should have thought about it. So at Boma, we completely redefined our value prop and our messaging. And basically all the messaging and any digital marketing that we did and our webinars, everything like that, we started to think, how does this align to what our clients and our users are thinking about right now? What do they care about right now because of COVID? So if you haven't already done it, I highly recommend adding it to your to-do list, working it with your team and update any client-facing content. So that's your website, that's your social channels, that might even be how you talk about your services, you know, on your website. Something that I've heard from many accountants and also many clients of accountants is avoid accounting teas. I know that's not exactly English, but you know, don't just think you can provide a list of your services on your website. You already know who you are. Instead, talk about how these services can be business benefits for your clients. Then if the reader wants to learn more about them and how they can access that benefit and how that translates into a service, they can always click through on your website or give you a, you know, reach out to connect with you to understand more. Being digital also means being more active on social media, doing online events, being active with your email database. And if you're not sure where to start with your email database, and we've had this with lots of Boma users, they say, I don't have an email database. And we say, well, you've got clients. Yes, we do have clients. Great, that's the start of your email database. You can send newsletters to them. You can send invitations to webinars and online events to them. It's a great place to start. And no doubt you'll have also had people who maybe aren't clients yet, but if you nurture them and engage with them and build that relationship, they might be in the future. So again, we were talking about reviewing messaging. So when you look at your messaging, ask yourself if it has empathy. Does it understand the situation as it currently exists for your clients? If your messaging is only talking about your growth services or similar, then you really risk appearing unsympathetic or unaware of the challenges in the current situation that your clients are going through. Many people, their businesses will be right on the cusp and they'll be struggling to survive. So talking to them about growth is entirely, you know, just approaching it from the wrong angle. Think about sort of approaching them with business continuity planning, how they can access government and local help and advice. You know, there will be lots of things that you can do that basically help them survive so that longer term they can recalibrate and thrive. Also consider that you're going to have lots of clients who might be reluctant to meet in person, and many are going to be working from home and spending a lot more of their time online. I know we are. I'm working from home, so I spend a lot of time online. So think about the opportunity that this presents to increase your digital marketing activity. So as I said before, that could be social media, that could be maybe running some ads, some Google ads. Even better would be doing some webinars or things like that. Anything that you can do both to support them, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides, but also to be relevant and stay front of mind and to sort of showcase your expertise in the current climate. So how do you support them? So we talked about empathy before. And if you think about just whether it was with your family or with your clients, it was crucial during the worst of the pandemic and in your post-COVID strategies, whether it's sort of where we are now turns out to be the new business as usual or things continue to improve, empathy is still really critical. So many of your clients' businesses will have been affected in lots of different ways, and lots will still be at risk. So empathy is really critical. And so what does that mean in practice? So an example of this could be if you're going to share something in a newsletter or on social media, think twice maybe about doing a blast out about, you know, how they can grow their business right now. If you have specific clients who are doing better than others and you know that they are looking for that, maybe you could send them a one-off email specifically talking about that service or sort of some strategies that they could put in place with them. But if you're sort of putting it out on social media where lots of your followers will be in lots of different situations, then think about something that will help them. So as I said before, you know, business recovery, some element which will basically help them survive. And then as the situation hopefully changes and gets better, you know, be aware of how things are shifting and adjust your messaging. You know, I'm not saying every week, but just, you know, every sort of, you know, couple of weeks, be aware of it. If things have changed, if things have improved or hopefully not gotten worse, just be aware of things and have that reflected in your client-facing communications and on your website. We talked about educational marketing, so doing things like webinars. And I've heard this said by quite a few clients talking about, quite a few accountants talking about their clients. And they said, look, the reality is at the moment, compliance is not going to help some of them survive. They really want to hear how you can support them. So I suppose have that front of mind. You know, what can you be doing on an individual level, but also, as Mike said, on the wider scale in terms of talking to lots of your clients. You know, what are the things that you can do to leverage your expertise to deliver to them, I suppose, valuable insights that they can turn to their business. So leveraging is really important. And we know that you guys are super busy. you're supporting your clients. You know, every client I've spoken to says that it's never sort of been busier, and the stress on you has never been higher. So there are things that you can do, and one of them, like we're doing now, is utilizing technology. So think of webinars and Facebook Lives as tools that I really recommend you to use. And I know that it can feel like every other day there's a webinar happening, but remember, that's us and our industry. You and I, we're all exposed to a lot of them. There's lots of them going around. But for a SME, as Mike pointed out before, they're often in the dark, they're alone, they're feeling like they're scrambling to survive, trying to fix their business. And so a webinar from you, their accountant, their trusted advisor, will be super welcome. And the ability for you to share advice and add value to them. And the nice thing about a webinar is that you can communicate to them one-to-many. So it's a great, it's a great opportunity for you to reach out and speak to as many clients as you can as possible, with the sort of expectation that sure, lots of them will have questions, you'll have educated them, but if they need more support, they can reach out to you directly. So rather than having those long conversations which really do eat up into too much of your time, you can educate and support many at once, and then sort of have those more, I suppose, specific conversations as required. In terms of those specific conversations, although you may not be able to meet directly with your clients, you can do one-to-one meetings. So again, Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts all offer the ability to have one-to-one meetings. And it's a great place, especially face-to-face, to identify their needs and position how you can help them. And I know Phil's going to talk about this more. And I just really can't stress enough that, you know, a one-to-one video call versus a phone call, it's a friendly face, it's someone who can empathize with them, you'll be able to read their reactions and they're yours, and it will be immensely supportive in a way that a phone call, is just not able to sort of hit those I suppose personal notes. Another point which we've sort of touched on briefly as well as Mike has, which is things are changing quickly. So think in the short term, don't worry necessarily about planning your activity for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. Plan out your marketing activity for the next month, then review it, identify what worked, what didn't work so well, and then take those learnings forward. Adaptability, as Mike pointed out, is really, really critical. So just getting on to this next slide. And this is a slide that our friends at the Gap shared, and it's a brilliant one. And I thought I would share it with you. So Viv Brownrigg, who is one of the founders of Gap, gave me permission. And I just think it's a really nice reminder that although we as a marketer would always recommend that when it comes to a call to action, you sort of keep it once, one call to action in an email or on a social post. And that's basically to make sure that it's crystal clear what you're wanting the person reading that post or that email to do. You can still have additional options. So you might have a call to action which might be want to learn more or know more, but if you do it right, you can still have other options where people can, I suppose, come in at different levels on the ladder. So you could offer them something of value. So you can see here at the top right-hand corner, you've sort of got the deepest engagement, which is the personal budgeting session. Well, at this point in time, maybe not everyone would be able to afford that, or they don't have the headspace for it. So you see 3 other different options on the ladder, right down to the first one, which is a free webinar. So all they need to do is basically turn up from that one. And then the next one above that is you could give them a personal budget template. And then there's sort of the cheaper personal budget review. But the idea here is that you can let them self-select the level of engagement and I suppose the level of support and structure that they want from you. And even if it's free, that's okay, because at least you have then got them talking to you, you're building that engagement. And you may then further down the track, when the time is right for them or their business, you might be able to move them up that value chain which obviously, you know, will be great for you as a business in terms of growing your own practice, but also, you know, when they're in a better financial position, they can take on some of those, I suppose, those more involved offers. So in terms of takeaways, and this is sort of specific to what I've been talking about, but it sort of does go across all areas, is just review your website messaging. So make sure it's up to date, make sure it's relevant. Send out regular updates. This doesn't always have to be, you know, that you have important news. Sometimes it could be just that you're thinking about your clients, you're aware of what's going on, and something is coming up next week. And Mike alluded to the use of video. Loom and Zoom videos are great. You can record them just in a couple of minutes from your phone or your laptop and send them out. And again, just if you sort of put your, you know, yourself in your client's shoes, they might have had, you know, a bad week. They're thinking, goodness me, it's quite bleak. And then you send them a video saying like, hey, I'm thinking of you. We've got some good stuff coming up next week. Keep an eye out for it. And that will be incredibly sort of lifting and supportive for them. Again, as Mike said, you can run regular webinars, open Q&As. It's a great place to, I suppose, have engagement, field questions, and you can do it pretty easily as well using technology. And then, you know, run those business continuity sessions, you know, based on their sort of clients' business health. Again, as I said before, compliance for some of them won't save them. So it really has to be, you know, all hands to the pump, and how you can support them sort of in the next 30, 60, 90 days. So Phil, I hand over to you. I hope I haven't stolen any of your talking points.
Not at all. No, that's good. It all leads in quite nicely, Charles. So thank you for that. So yeah, I mean, with everything that we've been going through over the last few months, it's hardly surprising that there's been quite a bit of debate in the accounting world about whether or not we should be selling anything. You know, after all, many of our clients' businesses have been shut down through no fault of their own. Some of them are facing incredible financial hardship and even contemplating closing for good. So if we move on to the next slide, now let's be honest, even in normal times, many accountants are really nervous about selling. You know, just the word selling brings us out in a cold sweat. And the thought of trying to convince a potential client or an existing client that they should really want to work with us or to do new things and working with us as opposed to every other local firm, it quite, you know, honestly, it can fill us with anxiety and nervousness. And the thought of telling a client that, yes, we can help them with their bounce back loan application, but that there's a fee associated with it, makes us feel really uncomfortable. So, you know, is this you? Does the thought of meeting potential clients, or heaven forbid, picking up the phone to follow up with a potential client, fill you with dread? Maybe you're stressing about how your inability to sell is holding you back from achieving the results that you're aiming for. So on our next slide, hopefully some of you will recognize this character. And maybe you're worried that you'll be seen as profiteering if you suggest charging clients additional fees. And no accountant I've ever met wants to be thought of as a lovable rogue. Well, the good news of sorts is that you're not alone. While some people have an innate ability to be persuasive and make others feel at ease, they're actually a bit of a rare breed. Most of us, to some extent, suffer from nervousness when we find ourselves in new situations. And let's face it, trying to sell something to someone you've not met before is a pretty unique situation. And when you add in the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in right now, then I think we're allowed to be a little bit nervous. So what is it that's going on in our heads when we're faced with the task of selling? After all, for most of you, you must be pretty smart and driven individuals because you've set up your own firm, you've launched it, and you've started to promote it. So why do we get so anxious about this horrible word selling? So on our next slide, you know, Mike explained earlier on that 49% of SMEs consider good communication skills the most important attribute of a successful accountant. So clearly we need to work on our communication skills. But communication isn't just talking, it's a two-way process. And I'm sure you've come across other accountants who don't get in the least bit stressed about business development activities. And when you meet them, you may have wondered how they're managing to be so successful and how they've overcome their own anxieties. The reality is it's actually quite simple, that the best ones have a structured system that they use to help them instigate and develop discussions. And this system is one that's based on encouraging the prospect to talk more than us. So if we move on to the next slide, and obviously the way we do this is to ask questions, lots of questions, but not just any old random questions, questions that are designed to get the prospect talking about their business, their home life, what's working, what's not working. And then we can start to understand whether or not we can help the prospect address whatever issues they're facing. And the more we take the time to think about the ways in which we can help potential customers or existing clients, the easier it is to develop a list of standard questions that we can use to help us identify opportunities to provide additional support. And this means that when we meet someone new at a networking event or over a webinar or on an online sort of Zoom networking event, or even if we're visiting or meeting a potential client for the first time, it's much easier to instigate a conversation simply by asking a few questions, questions that we already have prepared in the back of our mind. And these questions are very carefully designed. They're structured in a way that not only helps you uncover opportunities to provide a wider range of services to your client, but they're also designed to help you uncover how your services are going to help the prospect. Because the variety of ways in which you help the client is the real value of what you offer. So, for example, if you help a client obtain a bounce back loan that's going to help them remain in business, the value that you're providing here is not the successful loan application. The value is in removing the stress that the client was under. It's helping them sleep at night. It's helping them overcome the strain that the impact of COVID has created in their personal relationships. It's helping them provide financial certainty to their employees. It's helping them develop a plan of actions they need to take to get them back up and running. And it's helping them potentially restructure their business so that it's more viable for the future. And ultimately, it's helping them work towards their longer term business and personal goals. And when we think about, what's all of that worth to your client? You could argue it's priceless, but it's certainly worth a price of some sort. So on our next slide, I know some accountants who get really nervous about being asked questions to which they don't know the answer. And after all, we're all supposed to be experts, aren't we? Well, let's face it, none of your clients will know your services like you do. As an accountant, you trained for years to become the professional that you are today. And you've continued to undertake CPD to keep your knowledge up to date. But will you ever really know the answer to every question anyone could ever ask about your services? Probably not. But I'll guarantee that you know far more than the person asking the question does. So if on the off chance that someone asks a question to which you don't know the answer, don't try and bluff your way through it. Just admit that you don't know the answer and commit to finding one and getting back to your client. Because no potential client is going to criticize you for being honest, are they? They might possibly have expected you to have an answer, but they'll respect your determination to give an accurate answer far more than if you try and wing it and perhaps give incorrect information. And on the next slide, feeding back to one of Mike's points earlier on, it probably sounds obvious saying that it pays to be honest, but it's easy for panic to take over when we're asking questions that we don't know how to answer. But remember that our clients will remember how we dealt with them. And if we want them to remain loyal, we have to treat them with absolute honesty from the start, even in some cases if that means giving them bad news and telling them that perhaps there isn't a solid future for their business. Right now, some of our clients are in real financial distress. They're looking for a helping hand, for support, for advice and guidance. Mike said earlier that there's a great deal of power in making an emotional connection with clients and prospects. The emotional connection you make with them now will last for years. And the way you make that emotional connection is by asking these questions, understanding what's going on in their world, both their business and their personal world. Because if you can demonstrate that you understand the pressure that your client's under, they're more likely to have that emotional buy-in to want to work with you more. And if you get this right, and your clients will be loyal, they may even become one of your best sales assets if they're happy to make referrals and create testimonials for you. And on the next slide, for our, one of the big questions I've heard accountants raise time and time again is whether or not we should actually even be charging for all of this extra work that we're doing. And my answer to that is almost certainly yes. Mike's research highlighted that the quality of the service that you provide is far more important to SMEs than the price you charge. We all know that you get what you pay for, and clients quote poor service as the primary reason for switching accountants. And from your perspective, it's important to remember that you're running a business as much as your clients are. If the clients pay you, then you can pay yourself. You can pay your staff, you can pay your suppliers. Your staff will spend some of their earnings with local businesses and the economy keeps moving. And at a macroeconomic level, it's essential that we keep the cash moving right now. If the cash stops moving, economic recovery will take even longer. But I fully appreciate that we still need to take the client's position into account. So from the client's perspective, we really need to focus on the value that we're providing. Remember all of that stress we've just alleviated for them? That cash boost we've sourced that helps them continue trading and adapt their business for the future? That value deserves to be reflected in a fee of some sort. Now, of course, you might want to soften the message slightly by agreeing payment terms or even deferred payment plans. And there may be one or two clients who you specifically feel that you have to support on a pro bono basis. But as a general rule, if you're providing value, then that needs to be recognized and acknowledged through a fee. And Charles mentioned earlier that it's sensible to offer clients options. A free option where you provide clients with templates to do the work themselves, a low-cost option where they complete the work and you review it for them, or a premium option where you work on the project together. Giving clients that choice makes them feel far more comfortable. They're able to make a decision on what's right for them. And given the exceptional circumstances we find ourselves in right now, there's nothing wrong with offering a discount off our standard fees. It helps us avoid being accused of being a private walker. But remember that it sets a precedent that says that we do have standard fees that would ordinarily apply, but that right now we want to try and help our clients. So what next on our next slide? Now, as we've already touched on, being effective at selling, or if you prefer it, being more successful at helping clients needs a structured approach. A repeatable set of steps you can take and skills you can use to maximize the likelihood that the client will select you rather than one of your competitors, or that the client will agree to the fee you're quoting for providing all of this extra help that they so desperately need. If you don't have a structured approach, then all that sales-related stress, anxiety, and worry will rear its head time and time again, getting in the way of the success that you're looking for. So if you move to my final slide, if you'd like to learn some new skills or perhaps just polish your existing skills, then maybe our Sales Skills for Accountants workshop would help. These go into some of the topics I've mentioned, but in much more detail. And I actually know that some of you attending today have already booked your place for the next one, which is scheduled for next week. So if you'd like to understand more about it, please get in touch. And because, as I said before, customer referrals are always the best form of lead generation, there's a couple of quotes here from accountants who attended the last workshop that we ran a month ago. So if you'd like some more information, either pop onto the website or drop me an email. I'll be happy to tell you more. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks so much, Phil. Well, I think the only question we had so far is, are we going to get a recording? And yes, we'll send out a recording tomorrow. I didn't see any other questions come through. So look, if you're feeling shy and you have any questions sort of in the next day or two, when we send out the recording, you can obviously reply to us then. But in the meantime, look, Mike, thanks so much. I thought that research was really interesting, and be interesting to catch up maybe early next year and see what the how things have evolved, and if those the sort of the most important elements have remained so, or things have sort of switched up a little bit, depending on, I suppose, what the new normal is. Yeah,
no, absolutely. No, well, thanks for having me, and hopefully people found it useful.
Brilliant. And Phil, thanks again as always. And everyone, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you again on the next one. Have a good day.